everyone. Today I'm here with Anne Paq, who is a French photographer and filmmaker currently based in Paris. We invited her today for our Israel-Palestine series on peace and reconciliation. Anne has lived and worked in Palestine for over a decade and has been a member of the Activestills Collective since 2006. She also won the International Photographer of the Year award for her web documentary Obliterated Families, about the families in Gaza shattered by the 2014 Israeli military offensive. Yeah, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a bit about your background? What drew you to work so extensively in the Gaza Strip, from photojournalism to multiple documentaries about, or at least in some way, tied to the region?
Sure. So my background is actually not in photography. I mean, I studied politics and international law, and this is how I got into Palestine in the first place. Just after my studies in human rights law, I went to the West Bank to work with Palestinian NGO. But I always loved photography, and I found myself on the ground quite rapidly with my camera. And the Palestinian NGO I was doing an internship for actually needed some photos for one of the campaigns. So I started to be on the field taking photos, and more photography kind of took over my legal studies. And after some time, I decided just to switch to photography. And so I am actually a self-taught photographer. I was fortunate to join Activestills Collective in around 2006, right after the Activestills Collective was founded in 2005. And many photographers actually from Activestills are trained photographers. So I actually learned also a lot from them. I can tell a bit more about the photo collective also a little bit more. But then, around I think 2000, for some time I was between law and photography, but then I switched to being a freelance photographer. And I could only access Gaza in 2010. So I was in Palestine in 2003, but I could only access Gaza in 2010 because it's much harder to get into the Gaza Strip, especially as freelancer. And since then, I managed somehow to get permits to enter Gaza. So I decided to focus my work more on the Gaza Strip. So I work on different projects there, which I can also talk more about further into the conversation.
Yeah, very interesting. And you just mentioned already how you started working in the Gaza Strip. How was it to work there with the government? And how was it to be there as a photojournalist and be able to work actually?
So first of all, I was very happy to be able to enter Gaza. I mean, Gaza Strip, the Palestinians in Gaza, of course, are part of the Palestinian people. And I don't think you can talk about Palestine, or you can really know Palestine without being having got into Gaza. I was also the first member of the collective who could enter Gaza. So it was very important to develop our archives. So the first time I entered Gaza, I was very struck by a bit the difference. Like when you are in the West Bank and working, especially like covering the demonstrations of Palestinians against colonization, against the building of the wall, you always, of course, encounter Israeli soldiers and the repression, military raids, checkpoints. You cannot go over 10 kilometers in the West Bank without having to pass through Israeli military checkpoints. So the occupation is really deep, and colonization also, and it's very obvious. When you enter Gaza, it's a bit different. So first of all, to enter Gaza, you need to go through this huge crossing, Eretz, which really look like a border, actually, crossing. But then once you are inside the Gaza Strip, you don't see Israeli soldiers, which doesn't mean, of course, that Gaza is not occupied, because according to international humanitarian law, the Israeli military are still controlling the borders, the sea, the airspace, the population registry. So Israel is still the occupying power in the Gaza Strip. I want to be very clear, but still the sensation was a bit different inside Gaza. You had no Israeli army at the time. So yes, it's very important to remember, especially in the current context, that most of the population in Gaza are young, under 18. I mean, we are talking about 1 million children actually in Gaza, on the total population of 2 million point 3. So meaning that is very striking. And when you go in Gaza Strip, when you drive around, when the school finished, then you see the streets full of children. You cannot even drive your car. I mean, it's really very, very striking. And, I also encounter, and I think this is also very important to remember, like a very vibrant society. I mean, I started to work actually on a project dealing with artists and alternative scene in Gaza. So I could meet some fantastic filmmakers, painters. You have collective of artists. You are youth doing hip hop, doing parkour. I mean, it was really very striking to see that, and their first of living, their first of also meeting other people from other countries, because also we have to remember that Gaza has been sealed. People in Gaza are living under siege now for 17 years. So imagine a child that is now youth, 17 years old, never in his life or her life, like see a mountain. There is no mountain in Gaza, or went out of Gaza Strip. And we have to remember also it's such a tiny place. And this is also something that I was really struck by it. Like, you can just drive from north to south in 1 hour. It's basically 40 kilometers long, from like 10 to 6 kilometers wide. It's 360 kilometers square. So it's very, very, very tiny. And imagine all your life being confined to this territory. So there was also this difference with the West Bank, which is the West Bank. It's still much bigger, and you have also more internationals coming, more exchange, tourists, etc. In Gaza, you really have this feeling of suffocation. And even though people are trying to live their life as best as they can, and especially also families value education so much, like they would send their kids to universities, they will save up, even if the economical situation is very dear and you don't have like those opportunities. But still, they were really making their best to send their kids to university. You have geniuses in Gaza, like the best scores at universities are in the Gaza Strip. I mean, these kids are just amazing. And of course, I don't want to idealize, them, because this is also dehumanizing. But it was very striking to me when I first went into Gaza. So I said at the beginning that the Israeli soldiers were not inside, but you can feel the control and the presence still. How? Like, every time, as I say, it's a very tiny place. So there is, like, all around the Gaza Strip, in the barrier between that separate the Gaza Strip from Israel, like there is what we call the no-go zone. So Palestinians could not go close to the wall without the danger of being shot. So it means that you always hear shootings at the no-go zone. You always hear also shootings in the morning at the fishermen who try to go to the sea to get their fishes and are routinely attacked by the Israeli army. You also hear the planes, F-16, like breaking the barrier sounds, and also the drones. That is a constant reminder that you are under control. we have also to remind people that since 2008, we are now on the 7th or 6th, depending on how you count, like large-scale military attack by the Israeli colonial forces. So it means that people are always under this fear that the bombings will start again. And we see now that, that every time it got a bit worse, and now what is happening now is really horrifying, and we even miss the words to describe what's going on now.
Yeah, very interesting to get your from on the ground insight. And looking at Gaza right now, getting back to your own position as a photojournalist, the death toll of journalists in this conflict is extremely high. As Al Jazeera states, higher than in 30 years in any other conflict. As of December 17, 64 journalists and media workers were confirmed dead, 57 of them Palestinian, 4 Israeli, and 3 Lebanese. How does that make you feel as a journalist yourself? And how do you think does it impact the future of the press in conflict zones in your perspective?
Thank you for bringing up the questions. It's very disturbing. It's very shocking. So it's a mixed feeling of being angry about the killing of journalists, and also being very worried for my colleagues that are now working on the field. And I want to say it's not only about the Gaza journalists who are at risk. I mean, as a collective now, we are working very closely with Mohammed Zanoun. He's on the field. He's trying to send pictures, despite the fact that his house was targeted and destroyed. He has to flee with his family to the south of Gaza, and living in terrible condition, and fearing for not only himself but for his family, and he's still sending pictures. But also, I'm very worried for also our colleagues in the West Bank, because the targeting of journalists is not something actually new by the Israeli colonial forces. We need to remember, for instance, the killing of Shirin Abu Akleh, who was a veteran journalist by Al Jazeera, and she was shot while covering an Israeli military raid on Jenin, north of West Bank. She was wearing vest, press. I mean, it was obvious that, we could not miss that she was a journalist, and still she was shot. And at the beginning, the Israeli forces say, "Oh no, this is not us. No, the bullets come from the Palestinian fighters." But then there was investigation, and it was obvious that it was coming from the Israeli army, and the Israeli army had to admit it. So there were lies at the beginning. They targeted her, and so it's not something new. If you look every year at the report being by the Reporters Without Borders, then Israel is always criticized for all the obstacles to freedom of press, the attack on journalists. It's about also surveillance, intimidations, threats, journalists being imprisoned. I think now we have around 20 journalists Palestinian journalists who are in Israeli jail. So, it's an overall issue. Now, of course, what has been going on in Gaza against journalists is absolutely shocking, and it's unprecedented in any conflict the last decades. I also invite you to look at the reports by, the different journalist unions and organizations. So to understand the scale, we are talking, yes, about more than 60 journalists who have been killed in Gaza in 2 months. According to the Palestinian Syndicate of Journalists, we are more around 90 journalists. Now, if you look at, in order to have some comparison, if you look at the 2 decades of Vietnam conflict, it's around also 60 journalists. So in 2 decades, 60 journalists in Vietnam. Now in Gaza, in 2 months, we are over 60. And also we can look at Ukraine, there was a lot of outrage and criticism against Russia. And I think we are in 1 year and a half, we are now around 13 journalists being killed in the Ukrainian conflict. So, also in comparison, it's very, very shocking. So the question, of course, is why the journalists are being targeted, and they are targeted. I mean, it's not only in Gaza. We are talking about also in South Lebanon. There was 3 journalists killed. And, there was also investigation being carried out by Amnesty International showing that they were targeted. I mean, there was nothing like going on that hill. The journalists were really very obvious, and they were targeted by the Israeli forces. So it's Issam Abdallah was killed notably on 13 October, South Lebanon, and there was a whole investigation showing that the Israeli forces deliberately targeted him. And we have a very recent example also with Samir Abu Daka, the Al Jazeera also cameraman, who he was just like a few days ago was in Khan Yunis, and he was also targeted. He was left to bleed actually on the streets. It was impossible for the rescue team to reach him, and he bled like in the street for 5 hours in plain sight. I mean, it was no mistake that he was targeted. So, of course, as photojournalist myself, I feel this is like a step that if we allow this impunity and the targeting of journalists to continue, it means that no journalist nowhere is being safe. So it means that it's okay to target journalists. So it's very important to demand justice for this. And I think already there are some complaints which have been made to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, Al Jazeera for Samir Abu Daka, and other also, I think the International Federation of Journalists also is putting complaint now to the ICC. And we need to ask this question: how Israel is getting away with it? That's one question. And of course, why is the targeting of journalists? Is because, the answer is pretty obvious. Like, Israel does not want those images of the consequences of the brutal bombardment, those images to get out. And also we have to raise the question why international journalists were not allowed in. Because, of course, if we were there side by side with our Palestinian colleagues, it would be harder for the Israeli forces to target us like this. And we have also to raise the question, if we were talking about 60 international journalists being killed by Israel, would the reaction be the same? I mean, that should be, the fact that so many journalists are getting killed should be in the front page of every mainstream newspaper everywhere. But unfortunately, even if there were some reports, I don't want to say that there were no reports, but still it doesn't get the attention it should get. And I want to give like another example also of this other journalist, Momen Al-Sharafi, who about, I think, 1 week ago was live and had to report about the loss of 20 members of his own family. I mean, imagine that as a journalist, you become part of the story. So it's really heartbreaking, and I'm furious about this. I'm very angry. I might say that I'm kind of happy that in France, at least there is some movement of journalists to protest against this. And I'm part of a new collective called Reporters Solidaires. And we decided to actually demonstrate within the Palestinian Solidarity demonstration to highlight the fact that many journalists are killed in Gaza. So we held their images, and we had a banner in solidarity with our colleagues in Gaza, and we were joined by journalist unions, which is very significant. I don't think in any other conflict, you had like a block of journalists demonstrating in France against the killing of journalists elsewhere. So, we will keep going, and we will still protesting this. And I'm very worried, as I mentioned, for all the journalists in Gaza, and especially, of course, for the members that I know, the Activestills Collective member, Mohamed Zanoun.
What role can or does photojournalism and journalism in general play in implementing a path towards peace, reconciliation, and fostering empathy?
Yeah, this is a very good question. And I can go back also to the big project.
Yes, please.
We did in 2014, Obliterated Families, that I co-author with a Palestinian Polish journalist, Anne Paq. But this was like a huge multimedia project involving more than 100 people at the end who volunteers because they thought that this is really important. And what we tried to do in 2014, we had this huge number of families affected by direct bombing. I mean, I'm talking about families in their homes being targeted. So some families member, it was like more than 20 members killed in one bomb. And we had these numbers, 142 families who lost 3 members or more in the Israeli bombardment of the summer 2014. But, it was like a statistic. And I was in 2014 for 3 weeks inside the Gaza Strip during the offensive. So we could see when we were at the hospital, all these families coming. I mean, with many members killed. So it was very striking that there was something a bit different that was happening in comparison to the other Israeli offensive. But at the end, we are talking about statistics, and I was very disturbed by the fact that, okay, so now you have all families being killed under the rubble. Nobody will know them. We don't have any memories of them. We don't know who they are. What is their story? So the idea was to go back to Gaza and to meet the survivors. And this is what I did. I met 53 families, which is quite a huge number. And with Ala also, who went into Gaza, we tried to get their stories through text, videos, and photos, so that we humanize them. We understand who they were, and I think this is actually one of the duties that we have as journalists to go deeper and to show who are these people. If we are looking at what we see now in mainstream media, especially in the beginning. Now it's starting also to shift a bit, but there is a dehumanization of Palestinians. This is terrible. Like when, of course, there was atrocities committed on the 7th of October, and there was so many, all the media were interested into what happened and fled to Israel, flew to Israel, and have all these heartbreaking interviews, and we know the families who have been affected. We know their faces. The same also with Israeli hostages, but we didn't see the same amount of empathy and humanization of Palestinians victims. And I think this is like a failure of journalism. And with Obliterated Families, we did exactly this. We show those people as they are. We give face and stories to them. And I think this is what we should do now, because the amount of civilian death in Gaza is actually shocking, is beyond what happened in 2014. So I said that in 2014, it was 142 families, right? Now we are talking about hundreds of families of families which have been wiped out entirely or in parts from the civil registry. Who will tell their stories? I'm actually asking myself this question every day. I really hope somebody will take on what we did in 2014 and apply it to what is happening now. And it will be very hard, because now, what remains of them? We cannot even have access to the rubble. Some families, there will be no photos left because everything has been destroyed. And for some families, even there will be no survivors to tell their stories. So, but this is important that we try to do this work. It's important to say the statistics of what's going on now, even if the figures keep changing and added every day, because every day we are talking about 300 Palestinians killed in Gaza, and around half of them will be children. So we are talking now around 20,000 Palestinians killed. 70% of them women and children. So it's about 8,000 children now being killed, but thousands of Palestinians are still missing and they are under the rubble. So actually the figures will be much higher. So it's a catastrophe. I mean, it's a new Nakba, as the Palestinians say. And also the humanitarian situation is horrible, is very dear, is catastrophic as well. So we are talking now about winter conditions. We are talking about diseases which are like spreading very, very, very fast. And we are talking about hunger. Human Rights Watch just released a report talking about hunger being used as weapon of war. So this is not like something that cannot be avoided. We can avoid this. We can let the humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, but unfortunately now the aid is not sufficient. The aid is not getting in enough in sufficient number. So like we see now children actually starving in Gaza on top of being traumatized, on top of being bombed, on top of being, for some of them, injured and having lost sometimes members of their family. People are starving. How can this be possible? We need absolutely to protest against this and to call at least for immediate ceasefire so that the humanitarian aid can come in. And also, I forgot to mention something very important when we talk about Gaza, the Gaza Strip. More than 70% of the population in Gaza are refugees. And this is something also that is not being highlighted by the media. So meaning that most of the population in the Gaza Strip are refugees, especially from 48. They were forced to leave, their families were forced to leave their villages and forced to flee to Gaza. So we are talking about families who have like different generations being expelled, being traumatized. And, it's going back also to the root cause of this. And if we are not addressing the root cause, then, we are missing the point. And if we keep happening. But I think this is something that we should always recall, because this is also one of the criticisms that we can make to the mainstream media, is that they are not talking about the context. They are not talking about the decades of oppression suffered by the Palestinian people under the Israel colonial regime. Even the word colonization is not being used. Even now the word occupation, sometimes is not even being used. And this is a fact. This is like also against international law. But this is missing. Like for some media, everything started on October 7th. Which is a distortion of the truth. And it's also our duty as journalists, as media, to put things into the right context.
You were mentioning the root cause and that you feel like the root cause of this conflict is not being addressed. What, in your opinion, from your perspective, could help addressing it, and what is the root cause in your perspective?
So yes, when we are talking about the root cause and about the context, this is what I said before. Like we need to address the fact that the Palestinian people has been under oppression since decades. We need to go back to 48, and the fact that in 48 we had like more than 500 Palestinian villages which had been destroyed. We are like 3/4 of the population, so more than 700,000 Palestinians who have been expelled from their homes, and they became refugees. And the refugee status is you're not losing it from generation to generation. It's still very much for me the core of the issue, and will not solve what's going on in this area without addressing this, And I try to do this as, for instance, I was in Gaza this year in May, and in May, there was like 5 days of bombing, which, in comparison to what is happening now, sound like not so big, of course, but still some some families, they lost their homes. And I tried to actually do this. I choose among the families who lost their homes, families who were refugees, and to highlight this issue. So I went to them and I asked them to tell me their stories, the story of their families since 48. And they were like even surprised by my questions, because this is not usually what media are asking. I mean, media will ask, like, so what happened during the bombing? How do you sleep now? Where do you sleep? This kind of thing. But the fact that I go back to the history, like they were actually very interested to share, because this is very deep into the history of their family. And I met, for instance, this Nakba survivor. So the Nakba means catastrophic in Arabic.
Yeah.
It refers to this ethnic cleansing which happened in 48. So I met this Nakba survivor, and she was amazing, 93 years old, Intisa Mohana, and she told me her story about how her family was really actually wealthy and prominent in their village in 48. And like her father was a muhtar, they had land, they had trees. I mean, they had a very, very good life. But when the Zionist militias attacked their village, her brother was killed. And also, she was ready to get married. And with her fiancé, they built a whole house, a new house. And then she saw with her own eyes her house being destroyed, And then they had to flee to Gaza, and they had to start again their life. So they were poor, and her fiancé had to go out to work for 2 years so that he had enough money to build a house in Gaza. So she lost her house in 48. Now, I found her in 2003. In May, she was living with her sons in a big house with different floors, like 4 or 5 floors. I don't remember. She contributed to the building of her home by selling her gold. And that's something like very precious for women, to have the gold for the wedding, to have a new family house. And at 3:00 in the night in May during the bombing, she was like woken up by her grandson, taking like very, very fast to a car, and she had to be evacuated. And her house, the family house, was destroyed by Israeli strike. So imagine this life, in 48, she lost her house. In 2003, this is happening again. She had to evacuate to her daughter in another house. Now, of course, during this aggression, I talked to her daughter to ask what's happening with Intisar, and she told me, well, we had to flee. So now she has been displaced for the third time in her life. And I don't know, even like when we speak now, I don't know if she's still alive. It's now every morning I woke up and I'm wondering if the people I know, all the families that we documented with Ada Kandil in 2014. I mean, we are in touch with some of them, but are they still alive or not? And my friends also in Gaza, I have many friends now, and I'm so worried for them. Like every morning, I'm expecting some message, that they have been killed. So I think this is like the story of Intisar. It's one through this story we can understand so many things about what Palestinian people are getting through, and this is what we should do as journalists, is to tell the story and to go deep beyond. Of course, the atrocities that we see now need to be documented, but like we see now, tons of images, not necessarily in mainstream media, but at least in social media, we see the reality of what's going on. I mean, those images speak volumes. We are talking about entire family being killed. We are talking about hospital being also targeted, and we see those images with like injured are on the floor. with blood all over. We see, how can we not be shocked also by those images of children shaking from the shock of the bombing. So those images, of course, speak volumes, are important. But as journalists, we also need to tell, bigger story and to go into personal stories, so we can actually also reach to people, and we can give a full picture. But for this, we need also access. I mean, Palestinian journalists now are doing an incredible job. As I mentioned, there are errors, but we need also international journalists to go in, also because to give them also some relief and to take over this incredible but painful job that they are doing. I mean, the price that are being paid now is horrifying, and it needs to stop.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to what you were saying, working with the local population and having witnessed a lot of their very personal stories and being in touch with them. Can you say anything about their aspirations for peace? Like, is there any, like, let's say, collective narrative of like, this is what we need to do and this is what we would like to change? What are they doing and what are their thoughts on the matter?
Okay, thank you. We need to go back to the word peace. What does it mean? Because peace is not the absence of bombings. To feel at peace, you need to have your rights fulfilled. You need to have your security. You need to have opportunities. So I have the impression that for some people, there was quiet and peace in Palestine before October 7. This is absolutely not the case. I talk about Gaza being under siege. I talk about routine shootings at the no-go zone or at the fishermen. I talk about the Israeli military offensive, which keep coming back every few years. I talk about the lack of opportunities for people. I mean, 80% of the population in the Gaza Strip depend on humanitarian aid. I guess now it's 100%, and the humanitarian aid is not getting in. So even like before October 7, was no peace. We are talking about a military occupation, about a very harsh military occupation, which operates in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And we are talking about, also, let's talk about the West Bank and what's going on with the settlers, because we are now, since we have the most extremist, far-right Israeli government now in power, the Israeli settlers just are living with impunity, and the settlements have grown the last few years. I mean, I was in the West Bank in 2022 documenting the olive harvest, and I was shocked, and I know Palestine very well, but I was shocked by the level of settlers attacks, especially during olive harvest. We see them attacking Palestinians, just harvesting their olive trees and burning the olive trees, destroying it. And again, they operate not only with impunity, but with the complicity of the Israeli colonial forces. We saw that in videos when you have attacked by Israeli settlers, very brutal. And, next to them, there are Israeli soldiers, and they don't do anything. They are helping them. So we cannot talk about peace. And also, I want to use another word that we have not used yet. But we need to talk about apartheid. Palestinians are living under apartheid from the river to the sea. And this is not something that, I mean, if you visit, the place is very obvious. But it has also been documented by human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, which is a Israeli human rights organization. The UN also use that term. So apartheid is not peace. Okay, so I think the most, for me, the most interesting maybe proposal is the one state proposal. This is basically to say, okay, it's a very small territory at the end from the river to the sea, and people's lives are intertwined. We need equality for everyone. We need equality. And, it can be, of course, one state can have different form. It can be like a federation, or, it will be up to people to decide. But for me, this is the most interesting thing. And I think it's getting more and more support from the ground. So we are talking about one state for all the people who are there. So Palestinians, Israelis, but with equality of rights. I mean, this is already what people need to understand, is that Israel is controlling the life of the millions of Palestinians living there, but Palestinians don't have a vote. So there is no equality of rights. So let's, start everything from the ground, from like something new, a new paradigm, and one state for everyone with equality of rights. And of course, you need to have justice also. There will be no peace without justice, about acknowledgement of the crimes which have been committed. And this needs to have like different, we can imagine also different proceedings for this, but this is absolutely necessary, and all the refugees, also Palestinian refugees, because the Palestinian refugees are the biggest refugee population in the world. Now, it's quite obvious that many Palestinians in Gaza now who have been displaced probably will become refugees, many of them. So also those refugees, they have the right to return, and that should be also on the table. And this is a question of rights and justice for everyone. And I think this is, we cannot continue without dismantling the Israeli colonial logic. And this has to be also very clear.
How do you think the locals are perceiving the role of their own government in this conflict?
So, I'm international. I don't want to speak for Palestinians, and I think for this you need to interview Palestinian. I can say just by talking to people that, and we have seen also in previous years that the Palestinian Authority has lost credibility, has lost support. Many young people, and we see also that being expressed on social media, etc. They don't want to have anything to do with the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority has lost credibility and is being seen as operating actually as a security subcontractor for Israel. So they want something new that is away from the traditional parties. Myself, I see like a lot of hope in many Palestinian voices now that are more being heard. I'm talking about Mohammed Al-Kurd, for instance. I'm talking about Mariam Barghouti. I'm talking about all these like very eloquent and very clear and non-apologetic Palestinians who say clearly, what's the situation, and they found now echo even in some mainstream media, which I think is very important and a source of hope. But now, of course, if you talk now to any Palestinian people now, everyone is affected, and also I want to say that it's not only the Palestinians in Gaza who are deeply affected by the situation. I mean, I know some Palestinian friends who are outside. They have Palestinian families in Gaza. They cannot sleep. Like it's so hard. But even some who don't have families, I mean, they see their people being targeted. They see like a genocide going on of their own people. So of course, everybody is affected, and everybody wants this to add. And if you look at social media, they are asking why this is happening, how Israel can kill so many civilians now, so many children, so many women, and the world is silent about it, and the world is not acting. But I think this is also now a reflection, and it clearly shows also that the international system is broken. I mean, there is nothing that is being now in place to stop this bombing. Even if some governments are asking for a ceasefire, and we see also like a shift, but there is no actions, there is no measures. It's still like we still hear like Israel has the right of self-defense. As long as the governments, and I'm talking especially about Western governments, the US, but also France, and of course Germany, we have to talk about Germany, is keep repeating Israel has the right to self-defense. It just has to minimize civilian death. We are not getting anywhere. We need now to take sanctions against Israel. And we see the double standards. The double standards is being exposed, and the hypocrisy of the Western governments is being exposed when we see the reactions of the Western governments when it comes to Ukraine. It's very, very telling. Then, of course, we can take sanctions. We can act. Also, the general prosecutor of the ICC went to Ukraine, and everybody is asking Putin to be put on trial. Palestinians are asking why we don't see the same standards being applied to us. Are we not humans for this Western government? So I think now there is a lot of anger that is totally justified. And we as citizens, as European citizens, we have a duty also to confront our governments into backing, into keep supporting Israel, which is now committed genocide in Gaza. And I'm using the word genocide with great care because, as I mentioned, I studied human rights law, and just read the Genocide Convention of 48. It's very clear what is happening, and also hundreds of legal experts signed this letter saying that what we are seeing in Gaza is genocide. So the question is, in the face of genocide, what are our duties as citizens and as government? And one of the duties of the government, according to the Genocide Convention, even if there is just a threat of genocide, is to act to prevent this. So actually, when Western governments, such as France, such as Germany, are supporting Israel, notably by arms deals, then you put yourself in the position of being complicit with genocide.
So you've worked a lot, obviously, on the Palestinian side. The Activestills Collective, if I'm not mistaken, has also members from the Israeli side. And in your interactions with individuals on both sides of the conflict, have you observed any common ground or, initiatives where they're getting together and trying to achieve peace in a way, like build a way out of this war?
Yes. Thank you for this important question. So first of all, I'm just speaking on my behalf. I'm not speaking about, on behalf of the collective. Yes, Activestills is quite unique in the sense that we have Palestinian, Israeli, and international photographers working together, using our images to expose what we think is very important and to highlight the issues we care about. So we consider like the photos to be a tool to fight oppression in general. And something that we have done over the years is to use street exhibitions, meaning that we take the photos and we put them in the street because we consider that photos are important. Photos should directly reach the public without the lens of the mainstream media, and so we have done it in many Israeli cities, bringing back photos from occupied Palestine, and we also photos have been used like worldwide. Now we have actually exhibition a kit with the photos of Mohamed Zanoun from the current aggression in Gaza. People can download it, and it has been shown in different countries now. So this is something that we do. A common base is, as I mentioned, to recognize the nature of Israel. And I think this is the base that we can build on, meaning that the Israelis that are part of this group are anti-colonial and anti-Zionist. And this is a glue, like the political glue that we work on. So yes, there are some Israeli activists that I know and I've been working with for years, and this is not an easy position they are in, because they need to confront their society, and sometimes they are being ostracized, and we see some Israeli refuseniks also who are in prison for refusing to serve the Israeli colonial army. So of course those activists exist and their voices are very important, but we need also to be realistic that there are not many. And we see now, when we see the demonstrations now happening for a long time, actually demonstrations were even forbidden in Israel now, demonstrations against the bombings in Gaza. Even like there was a demonstration, I think a few days ago, and there were like 20 people, something like this. So their voices are extremely important, but they are not enough. And yes, it's very important to work with them, to give them a platform, but there are not many, and this also comes from some reasons that has to do with the media in the Israeli society. Now, if you are listening to mainstream media, and I'm asking my Israeli friends, they say that they are horrified by what is being said in the Israeli mainstream media, or how the killings of civilians is being justified. It's also has to do with the militaristic nature of the Israeli society. I mean, everybody has to go through the army. And this is a time, we are talking about 3 years. 3 years for men, 2 years for women. So this is a very, very long time. And this is where also, some narrative is being built and is being ingrained into the people psyche. That is very, very, very hard to break. So some people are breaking it for different reasons. Sometimes it's just like one meeting with a Palestinian, or being confronted with the violence of the Israeli army during demonstration, or Israeli police. But it's very hard to break this. So this is why, for things to change, we need actually international pressure. I don't believe that, from one day to another, like the Israeli society will wake up and say, "Oh, this is horrible, what we are doing, and we need to change deeply, and we need to make peace with the Palestinians. We need to give them their rights. We need to reconcile. It will only work with sanctions and international pressure, I think. As I mentioned, like there are some Israeli activists who are amazing, and I was actually with some of them in the West Bank in 2022 during the olive harvest. So Israeli activists joining the Palestinians, going to their field to try to put their bodies also on the line. So that when there are Israeli settlers attacking, or the Israeli army coming, then they can be in front, and they can try to help, and this is very admirable from them, because they are also in danger by doing so.
And these projects or collaborations, the images of this can be seen on the Activestills Collective page, and in these exhibitions, as you said, or where can we find them?
Yeah, so now, if you are looking at Activestills website, we have more than 50,000 photos. So those are huge archives, and you can search by keyword, by the photographers, by dates. So it's very valuable archives that we have been building over the years. And yes, I encourage everyone to to look at our archives for sure. And I encourage everyone also to look at Obliterated Families. Also, we have many Germans now looking at this. So I encourage you to go to Obliterated Families and to look into the Kilani family chapter. Just read that chapter, because we are talking about in 2014 of one Palestinian German family who have been killed by Israel in Gaza, and 5 of them had actually the German passports. So there was a court case, an attempt and a complaint in Germany by Ramses Kilani, who is like the son of Ibrahim Kilani, who was killed in Gaza. So we are talking about 5 German citizens, 4 of them kids, and actually the general prosecutor in Germany decided not to open an investigation. And this is contrary to his obligation, actually, because in Germany, if some German citizens are killed abroad, then he needs to open an investigation. Okay. But in that case, he made an exception. He made an exception because they are Palestinians. They are German Palestinians. So what are the consequences for Palestinians in Germany to hear about that? I mean, are they like second-class citizens? And now it's happening again. I saw actually just yesterday that there is a new complaint that would be filled up by the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights, ECCHR, because again, a Palestinian German family was killed now. And we are talking about the Abu Jadala family. And there will be a complaint in Germany. So it will be interesting to see what the German prosecutor would say again, because it's actually the same case, like a German Palestinian family being killed in Gaza. There's obligation by the German prosecutor to at least open an investigation. And in the Kilani case, he did not. He closed the case, so which is absolutely denial of justice for the Kilani. And now we are going to see if this is the same. And by the way, I did a documentary with Dror Dayan about the Kilani family, which is called Not Just Through Picture. So it's also right now, actually, we are showing it in quite many places. And if people are interested, also maybe you can put the reference into the notes, because definitely. We are very adamant to share the documentary and have discussion with the public about this, because this is, again, in the same spirit of Obliterated Families, that the documentary is about one family and trying to understand what does it mean for the survivors to have many members of their family being killed and how it is perceived and their struggle for justice. And he has to do also with Germany, because Ramses and his sister Leila are in Germany. And, they're also now very amazing speakers when it comes to Palestinian rights in Germany. And this is very much admirable from them. So I invite also everyone to contact us if you want to screen the documentary.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to look into it. As a final question, adding on to that, I would like to ask you about, in your opinion, having worked with these families who are directly affected and have lost many of their family members, what steps can be taken to address this kind of trauma and wounds of the past and present for both Israelis and Palestinians? Yeah, I'd just like to know, what's your experience there with the families you've mentioned?
It's a very important question about the long-lasting trauma about this. You cannot heal your trauma if you are still under threat of being bombed. And when I talk about the Gaza Strip and how the bombings and the military offensive, large-scale military offensive, keep happening, you cannot rebuild yourself. Like it's just like you are being re-traumatized every time. And it's like, with Ala Kandil in Obliterated Families, we did a short also that you can see online on Obliterated Families. It's called Gaza, a Gaping Wound. And this is like you cannot rebuild yourself if you don't have a sense of security, if your rights are being infringed. So as long as we don't have like a long-lasting solution and the sense of justice also, like to heal from trauma, you need to have justice, or at least acknowledgement of what happened by the perpetrators. So That would take time, that would take a lot of political efforts so that we can reach a long-lasting solution. And, this is something I always say in my presentation because I lived through it. Of course, I was privileged, and there's nothing, I'm not Palestinian again. I was privileged to be able to leave Gaza in 2014 after 3 weeks of documenting the bombings and the atrocities. It's still with me, and I could get out. I'm not like, I didn't leave any more like live through more bombings. I could get some psychological help, but it's still with me. Like every time now if I hear a plane, being low, or firecrackers, for me, like New Year's Eve is not fun to have all the fireworks because they stay in you. And I lived only for 3 weeks and I am a foreigner. I could get out. So what about the kids? What about the kids who have lived through this? And what we are seeing now, it's another stage even. So how can you heal yourself if you live in miserable conditions in tent? Even like if now we stop now, let's say this kind of ceasefire, but you live in tent. You have no autonomy. You cannot cook for yourself. You are afraid for the well-being. You are fighting disease. I mean, you cannot heal your trauma with these conditions. So it needs to be addressed in a very deep level, going back to the root causes. And we have a responsibility towards the children of Gaza in general. So we need to put all the means that we have to try to find a long-term solutions that will address again the root cause. When it comes to Israelis traumas, it's about trying to understand also the root cause of everything and trying to make a revolution in your own society to get to the right answers. And you cannot heal yourself by bombing other people and by committing more crimes. I mean, that's pretty obvious for everybody with common sense. So I'm hoping that many Israelis will wake up to the nature of their society and will demand a total change of direction. And I think actually, if you are listening to some families, especially who still have hostages in Gaza, this is what they are asking. They are asking for a change. They are not asking for revenge, because revenge is certainly not a strategy. Revenge is not acceptable. Revenge will only bring more traumas to everyone in place, and that will certainly not heal their own traumas. So, it has to be based on rooted in human rights, rooted in the respect and the understanding of what's going on. And I still keep the hope alive because we have to. It's a long struggle, and I have many friends, as I mentioned, like Palestinians, also Israelis, and I'm really hoping for overall long-lasting change that will bring justice and peace in the region.
Thank you so much. That was all very interesting. I'm very glad that we were able to have your voice on here. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to get off your chest?
Yes, thank you for the conversation. And I know the tensions are very high now. And sometimes, people have very strong reactions, etc. But I'm really asking everyone to really understand that now in Gaza, this is really something that has to be stopped now. The Israeli bombings has to be stopped. And I really also want people to act inside their own community and not to be shy about talking. I think we owe this to the Palestinians. We owe them to speak truth, even if it's difficult. And this is very important, not to stay silent, because if we stay silent in the face of genocide, then, we are complicit. So I'm just asking everyone, just, look at what's going on and speak up and act upon it. This is what I'm I'm hoping for, and this is why I'm working now and trying to talk and reach people.
Thank you so much. We're also going to link all the organizations that you listed, the Activestills Collective and your documentaries for people to check out. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot to you.